Hello dear students, my name is Gaurav Bansal, your teacher for Indian Economy at GS Core. Now let us start with our discussion on the part 3 of the syllabus explanation. Syllabus explanation is a very important exercise and particularly so for Indian economy because the UPSC syllabus that is provided to us is not very clearly defined, is not very well designed. If you compare the syllabus to the questions that have been asked, you will remain confused, as in you can't trace many of the questions to the syllabus that is provided. Means you have to study many more things compared to what that is given in the syllabus. In that exercise we have already covered two videos, wherein in the first video we covered the basic concepts where we study about economics only as a subject, and not yet we introduce the Indian economy. So microeconomics, macroeconomics, national income measurements, etc. So that was basic concept. It is something you need to understand in order to grasp Indian economy. Then Indian economic planning and reforms. Okay, so our planning process and over time what reforms we have brought. So it's a summary of all the policies that have been made by the government until now. Now we are moving to the third section of this syllabus. I have divided syllabus into 8 sections in total. So third theme or third section we are going to discuss today, that is budget and the public finance. Let us start with that. So broadly, when we look at the budget and public finance, essentially what are we talking about? So budget as such is not even given in our constitution. Our constitution say annual financial statement, article 112, let's say. So the budget itself is a statement of the consolidated fund of India. So first we should start with the accounting system in India. Okay, so you should have very clear idea about what is consolidated fund of India, contingency fund of India, public account of India, what type of transactions are there in each of them. Okay, what are the rules there, for what purpose we need to take the approval from the parliament. So all of that you should start with. Then eventually you will study budget, that what is budget, what are the types of different account in the budget, current account, capital account. In current account, what type of expenditure and revenue are recorded. In capital account, what type of expenditure and revenue are recorded. Then budget can have several types. There can be a balanced budget, there can be surplus budget. Okay, so we need to understand what type of budget India is following, what are the advantages of that or disadvantages of that, and what are the pros and cons of the other budget types. Okay, so that you need to do. Then in that budget types, we now have several type of reforms as well. Okay, so reforms also you need to cover. So for example, green budget. Green budget is a budgetary reform, although some people call it a type of budget. So you can understand that whether you call it a type or reform, anyways the question will never be asking you whether it is a type or reform. You simply have to cover that topic. So green budget, gender budget, let's say zero based budget, these are all budgetary reforms. Then the impact of the budget on economy. So if government increase the tax, government decrease the tax, government increase capital expenditure, all of that, what kind of impact it has on Indian economy overall. So government has an expenditure, government has income. If government want to increase income, it can increase taxes on you. If government increases expenditure, it can decide to make new roads, new ports, so they will increase facilities for you. So likewise, impact also has to be understood for each type of expenditure and each type of the revenue of government. Then we move ahead and we talk about the revenue side. Okay, as the budget always has two type, or any account has two type, the money received and money spent. So revenue is the money received by government. So here we have tax revenue and non-tax revenue. Tax revenue we can understand very easily. Okay, so that is something in itself a very big topic, because we have all the different types of taxes, income tax, GST, okay, corporation tax. Then we have number of other topics related to tax reforms. So tax, and then there is non-tax revenue. There is some other money also coming to government, but not in the form of tax, but maybe in the form of income. Government is selling a lot of things. For example, when you apply for a driving license, you pay certain money for that. That is a administrative income for government. You pay certain fee, fine, challan, etc. All of that is example of non-tax revenue. So we need to understand and go through the different types of income of government very carefully. Then we need to look at the government expenditure. where government spend money, and eventually it is the subsidy on which maximum question has been asked regarding the expenditure. If we look at the topic of tax and subsidy, overall every year usually there is a question on either of them. On taxation, just on the GST itself, there have already been 2 direct questions, and indirectly there is 1 more question. Okay, so there are a lot of questions from here. Subsidy also, there are many questions from there in past. So overall, if you look at this topic, usually there is always a question on this topic. Okay, so then you have to go into the topic of taxation in depth. Okay, where you study the tax type, direct taxes, indirect taxes, which type of tax is what, and if we need to increase our income, which type of tax we should increase. If we increase a certain tax, what is the impact on corporates, what is the impact on common people. All of these topics we need to understand. Okay, so types, impact, reforms, and eventually fiscal policy. Okay, so fiscal policy also we'll discuss in detail now. This is just the bird eye view, what all we need to cover. Let us get into more details. If we want to map this whole section with the UPSC syllabus, in the UPSC syllabus there is just one word called government budgeting. Okay, they do not even mention the word tax, they do not mention the word expenditure, subsidy, nothing. Okay, they just mention this word, and this is our interpretation of this word. Now, let's talk about the budget. Initially, the budget is the topic that you have to start with. As I told you, first you need to learn about the government accounting system. So the consolidated fund, public account, okay, all of that you need to understand. What are the different types of government account? Then you need to understand the different types of budget, okay. Then the budgetary reforms. This part I've already explained to some extent, so I'm not repeating that part. Budgetary reforms, for example, maybe we are trying to cut unnecessary expenditure. For example, maybe we are trying to improve the tax collection system. For example, we can be trying to increase our expenditure on environment through green budgeting. So green budgeting, gender budgeting, zero-based budgeting, all of these are different examples of budgetary reforms. Apart from that, there are very specific number of examples for which there is no specific term, but you have to study all of them. Okay. So for example, cutting unnecessary expenditure is a budgetary reforms. Reducing your tax expenditure is a budgetary reform. Reducing the tax collection cost is a budgetary reform. So budgetary reforms are endless. There are so many points there. You need to understand what reforms India has taken so far and what are further required. Okay, so that all you need to study here. Then within a budget, we have current account, capital account, that you need to understand which entry go into which type of account, what is the significance of each account, in which account expenditure should be increased, in which account we should be getting more income. So all of that you need to study here. Then government revenue and the spending trend. So I've already discussed that to some extent. So from where government is making money, we explained already the tax income, non-tax income, okay, and where government is spending, we should understand the trend of it as well. For example, when we look at the overall revenue of government of India, from the regular income, from the current account, 85% of income is tax income, tax receipt, and 15% of government income is from non-taxes. This is the general division. And when we check with the capital account, current account, about 70% of Indian government money is coming from current account, 30% is coming from borrowing in the capital account. So likewise, this is just to give you a rough idea. So you should have some trend ideas in your mind, okay, what is the overall trend there. So taxation overall account for 60% of our income. The non-tax income account for roughly 10% of our total income, as in government's income, and then about 2 to 3% come from, let's say, sale of government assets, like sale of government companies, sale of government shares, etc., and the remaining come from borrowing. So that's how we need to understand the trend. Similarly, we have expenditure trend, like 20 to 22% on average we are spending right now on interest payment. Okay, another 18 to 20% we are maintaining on salary, pension and maintenance. Okay, likewise we have different nature of expenditure. For example, a topic from expenditure trend which is in news for last 2-3 years is capex, capital expenditure. Government of India has been able to increase its capital expenditure successfully. So that is also an important trend. So these type of trend they ask in question. What are the reasons for rising trade deficit? What are the reasons for rising? For example, trade deficit is another question in external sector. Here the fiscal deficit they can ask you, okay? What is the reason or what are the shortcomings despite increasing capex? So those type of questions they can ask you. Budgetary analysis is what you do with the trend, that what is done, what is not done, what should be done. When something is done, government takes a step, okay, what are its impact, what are the gaps, all of that comes in budgetary analysis. Okay. Now, then we have quality of budgetary spending and capex. I already talked about that you are spending money, okay. Every year we spend a lot of money through budget, but what is the quality of that expenditure? Is it actually improving the life of people or not? Okay, for example, we increase our budget by 10% this year. We will increase expenditure by 10%, but majority of that expenditure, let's say, we assume is going into interest payment. We are using that money to pay off the interest on our loans, okay. So it is not helping people. Even if government can argue we have increased the expenditure, it is not helping people. So quality of expenditure improves when you improve the living standard of people. That happens when you spend money on infrastructure. You create better public facility, you create better system, you provide better health and education facilities. So that has to be there. Then we study certain subsidies where government provides subsidies, money to people directly, indirectly, okay. And subsidies, since they are linked to welfare, they are always a very important topic. So we have to understand their impact also, whether, for example, government is giving a lot of subsidies in agriculture. Is it actually helping farmers or not helping farmers? If it is not helping farmers, what changes do we need to bring? Or do we need to spend that much money elsewhere? All those questions we have to think about. Okay, subsidies and their impact is also a very important area. Government revenue expenditure, we already generally discussed that. Then after this, there is a very important topic in budget where we talk about center versus state, because budget is not just the center's budget, states' budgets are also there. So what is the distribution between the center and the state? How much financial power is with center? How much financial power is there with the states? How much center has to give to states? How much are states dependent on the center? So that is also something you need to study here. Then the finance of the local bodies. How much independent are local bodies? How much funds they have? Are they able to manage their expenditure? Are they able to improve their quality of expenditure? All those topics are there in the local body finance. Then we have topic of government schemes. Okay, what different schemes government has announced in the budget and what is their impact? Usually we see one mains question from the topic of welfare related to government schemes and many questions in PT also related to this government schemes topic. Let's move ahead. So this is generally what you need to study in budget as a whole. Now, next topic is fiscal policy. What all we need to study in fiscal policy? Just give me 1 minute, please. Yes. Yes. So in the fiscal policy, first of all, we need to study the fiscal policy tools. What are the possible tools? What government can do in order to improve its budget? If government want to reduce its deficit, if government want to spend more money on people, what tools are available to the government? Okay, so fiscal policy. The policy of government expenditure and government revenue generation changes which have an impact on demand in the economy. This is how we can generally summarize fiscal policy. Like monetary policy is mostly about the management of money supply and interest rate, and through that we impact the investments, the interest rate, the inflation. Similarly here we have the expenditure, we have the taxes, we have the non-taxes and other, and through that we impact the people's demand. we impact the prices, we impact the income. So fiscal policy directly affects the demand in the economy and also affects the prices in the economy. By affecting demand, it can also affect the investments, and hence it is also linked to growth. Then we have deficit financing. Okay, so what if your government is not able to earn enough? What if government has shortage of money in its budget? So in India it happens always. In India this is the usual trend. In fact, not just in India, in majority of countries in the world there is deficit financing. So deficit financing is not something that we can wish away. So deficit financing is very much the part of the policy making. Now, if you know you are not making enough money, then how do you manage your budget? You are borrowing money, fine, but how much can you borrow? How much you should borrow? Where you need to spend the borrowed money? All of that you need to study in the deficit financing. Then the types of deficit. There are different types of budget deficit. Deficit of the current account, which is the revenue deficit. Deficit of the capital account, okay, which we do not generally study separately. We study fiscal deficit, we study primary deficit. So all those types of deficit you need to study. Then there is FRBM Act, Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management. So in this act, what are we doing? Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act essentially is about under what limits you should have your loans. If government is borrowing money, how much it should borrow and where it should have limitations. How much total loan it can take, how much losses it can have in current account, how much overall losses it can have. All of that comes under FRBM Act. So FRBM in a way is a guideline which directs our fiscal policy. So it's a very important topic in fiscal policy. All of this you need to study. Then we come to the topic of taxation. So there are three big topics in this section: budget, tax and fiscal policy. So taxation, here we need to study the objectives and the principles of taxation. Why we impose tax? For example, some taxes are there because we want income. Then some taxes are there not because of income purpose, but because we want to discourage something, because we want to discourage some activity. For example, we have security transaction tax. Security transaction tax is a very small tax which is not enough to give government too much of income. It's not aimed at income, but it is aimed at discouraging people from buying and selling shares very quickly. So for example, there can be various reasons behind various taxes. On certain products we have very high taxes because we want to discourage them. For example, diesel cars. For example, polluting type of products which have a damage on society like alcohol, like cigarettes, okay. So on certain products we can have very high taxes, on certain products we can have very low taxes or even zero tax. For example, we are encouraging electric cars, so we are not having tax on them. So there can be various objectives, okay. So of course the most important is to make money, because government has to earn some money in order to maintain this entire machinery. That is always the most important, but then there can be many more. Then there are certain principles of taxation. Okay, we are imposing this much tax, but in what manner taxes should be collected? Tax को कैसे लगाना चाहिए? How we should impose the tax? There are certain principles. The taxes should be very simple. It should not be complicated. Then we should not charge tax 2 times for the same activity. एक ही काम के लिए 2 बार tax ना लें, for example. Okay? So there can be number of such principles which you have to study. There should be principle of convenience, okay, likewise. Then next we have taxation for mobilization of resources, which is revenue, okay. So we impose taxes so that we can get money which we can invest back into economy. So this money is not just to run the machinery which I was talking about in the last part. We need money to run the machinery, that is your regular expenditure, revenue expenditure. But then apart from that, we also need money to take the country ahead, to invest. That is mobilization of resources. So we do tax extra in order to create infrastructure, in order to create institutions in order to improve public delivery of services. So that is under the process of mobilization of resources. Then tax system in India. What are the different taxes that we have in India? What are the direct taxes? What are the indirect taxes? All that entire list you need to be aware of. Okay. So how many taxes are there? What are the benefits of each tax? What are the disadvantages of each tax? What changes we can do in each system? For example, there is a capital gain tax in which recently there have been number of changes. Earlier it was up to 3 years. Now it is up to 2 years. Let's say the short term capital gain tax. So you will understand these final details when you get into depth of these. So in the tax system in India, not only how many taxes are there, you also need to study which tax is imposed by sector. Who is collecting money from each tax? Local bodies have how many taxes? States have how many tax power? How much tax power? All of that is part of the tax system in India. Then tax reforms. What improvements we have to bring in the tax system? Then GST itself is such an important topic I have mentioned separately. So GST had a big impact on different sectors of economy. You have to understand how GST is helping government or common people or economy in reducing tax evasion, how it is encouraging certain economic activity, how it is discouraging certain economic activity, what improvements we can still make in GST, all of that will come here. Then there is a topic of tax expenditure, okay, which is accidentally mentioned twice. So anyways, it's last year and first year. Tax expenditure, when we use the word, it means the expenditure against the tax. It is not the actual money that government spend on people, but it is the money which government in a way give to people in the form of tax concession, tax benefits, tax holidays. So when government give a tax incentive or tax break, that is called tax expenditure. For example, under PLI scheme, all the companies which are investing in India in chip manufacturing or other key areas, they are given certain tax incentives. That is a type of tax expenditure which is a result of fiscal policy. We have center state distribution of financial power, which we discussed earlier, local body taxes, okay. Then there is a topic of tax collection effort and cost. Not every tax can be collected very easily. Some taxes are very difficult to collect. Some taxes can be very easy to collect, okay. So for example, agriculture tax is very, very difficult to collect, because agriculture is entirely informal sector in India. So government does not get data automatically from agriculture for large part. Some data we do get regarding the total sale, purchase, etc. But still we do not have enough data to start taxing farmers. Okay, we need to improve data collection. So all those challenges that are there with the tax, you need to study specifically with each tax. Then agriculture tax. In India, there is no tax on agriculture income. How that is a problem? Why that is a big issue? You need to study there. Then overburden on middle class is a recent topic which is there in news, and it's a big emerging theme on which there can be question as well in future. So certain people in India bear the burden of entire economy. Okay, 90% of the taxes are paid by just 1% of the population in India. So some people have overburden of tax while others do hardly pay significant tax. So that is also a problem. Overall tax is very less in India, but since it is too much on certain people, particularly salaried people, for example, who are earning 30 lakh rupees in corporate sector, they first of all pay 30-35% income tax. Then if they try to put their savings into stock market, on the stock market also they have to pay security transaction tax, they have to pay capital gain tax. Okay. Similarly, if they want to, let's say, buy anything in the market, they have to pay GST on it. So everywhere they have to pay tax. Overall tax burden on these people come close to 50% of their income which they pay as tax. So these people call it unfair, okay, which is a reasonable issue that we have to consider. We cannot ignore their needs anymore. So this is all what you need to look for in this section. Now let us look at some of the past year questions. So sample questions from the budget and public finance topic. Question number 1, what are the reasons for the introduction of Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act? I told you it's a very important legal change. So on this there was a question in 2013, and by the way, in 2011-12 we made big changes in the FRBM. So at that time it was in news. So this is a direct question on the tax reform and the fiscal policy indicator. Then there was a direct question on tax expenditure also. What is the meaning of the term tax expenditure? Okay, taking the housing sector as an example, discuss how it influences the budgetary policies of the government. So government give a lot of tax incentive for the people who take home loan to buy a house. So the question is in that context. And again in 2012, by the way, the tax benefit for people who take home loan increased to 4 lakh rupees. So remember, even if there is a question on a standard topic, usually question is asked when there is some change introduced by government in that year or just prior to this. Then in 2019 there was question on GST. Okay, so enumerate the indirect taxes which have been subsumed in GST, which was an expected question. It was very much on the lines that we were expecting. In 2017 GST just came in July. In 2018 also it was going through many changes. UPSC didn't ask it even 2018, they asked in 2019, and by that time the GST system stabilized significantly. So it was very well expected in 2018 as well, although UPSC asked in 2019. But this is a direct question on a tax system, okay, and a reform. Then public expenditure management is a challenge to the government of India. Now this is about the quality of expenditure. Previous questions were on tax. This is a question on expenditure. That how do you maintain your expenditure in such a way that public facilities also improve, maintenance is also done, okay, you are also able to deliver on welfare. So all of that is a challenge, and that is why public expenditure management is a challenging thing. So that was a question in 2019, for example. Similarly, you can see a question regarding GST again, regarding the compensation in 2020, because during the COVID period and even before that in 2019, GST compensation was a problem. I cannot go into depth to explain this point because it's a very big topic in itself, but GST compensation was a problem where center promised to the states that if they have loss in the revenue because of GST, center will pay for it, but center could not pay it when it was required. So that was in news at that time, okay, and it was a major challenge to the federal system. Then there was a very easy question in 2021, very straightforward question, and it's not related to any current affairs. Distinguish between the capital budget and the revenue budget. So they asked a question directly on the classification of the budget. That is why even the very basic idea in the budget can be asked. So if you look at the nature of these questions, it covers the fiscal policy, it covers the taxation, it covers the overall budget. And this is just a sample of the question. There are so many questions from this topic that overall there are about 16 questions from this area in the last 10 years. So it's a very important area which will fetch you 20 to 25 marks in the paper. And it's not that difficult to do. And anyways, if you do not understand this very well, it is difficult to follow other areas of economics because they are also fundamentally linked to budget. So anyways, you need to cover this area comprehensively, not only covering the factuals but also understanding the basics and the concepts so that you are able to utilize them, you are able to apply them in number of other areas. So I hope this discussion has given you an idea of what all you need to cover from this section and what type of questions are there. I have also given you idea overall how many questions, marks, topics are there from this area. This is only mains. If you look at PT, in PT also 2 to 3 questions from this section are there almost every year. So even from PT point of view, this is very important. So we'll be meeting you very soon with the 4th video in this series where we'll be talking about financial system and monetary policy. I hope this video has helped you, it has improved your understanding of the syllabus, and will be bringing more such videos to you. Thank you.